In this episode of the IT Experts podcast, we help you work out what world-class service delivery looks like. Welcome to the IT Experts podcast, the only podcast to help MSPs scale to 1 million, and if already there, get to 5 and go faster. At the end of the day, isn't it all about building a business that works for you rather than you for it? I hope you enjoy the show. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the IT Experts podcast. Today, we've got a really special guest, and we're going to be helping you work out and understand the intricate details of world-class service delivery. And we've got Darren Strong on the podcast today. Good afternoon, Darren. How are you doing?
Hello there. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
No problem at all. Well, we've had some really interesting and deep conversations coming into preparing for the show. So this is going to be up there with one of those pillar shows, I think, because this is a really important issue. You know, we spend a lot of time getting new leads in your MSP, building your MSP up, and recruiting people and everything like that. And so many times when we start digging into and lifting the lid on service delivery and what does that look like and what does good and what does bad look like, it's kind of like sometimes it's like opening up a bit of a can of worms. So we've got Darren on the podcast today, and he's going to help us out understand this. But before we get cracking into the detail, Darren, just explain to everyone, if they don't know who you are, what you do, and who you help.
Yep. So Darren Strong at Scalable MSP. So we help MSPs unlock efficiency, profitability, and time with dedicated consulting services. And this has all been born out of demand. So I've been in MSP world for just over 20 years. I'm very well known for operations, but been a big part of the community. And that's basically where the demand was driven.
Yeah, Darren, Stuart and I say all the time, we're just privileged to be working in this community and in this sector because everyone's so giving, everyone's so sharing. They listen, take on board, and you know, as you probably know as well, or you do know as well as we do, when you start supporting some of these techie business owners to achieve things and build a great business, it's great, isn't it? So, which communities have you been involved in?
Yeah, it's been a big part of ConnectWise for the biggest chunk of it. Been around some others as well, but the ConnectWise has been the community that's really helped me. So not just the ConnectWise community, but also what used to be called HTG, that's now called Evolve. So that peer group is really where I cut my teeth. I was very fortunate to be in rooms of principals that owned businesses, and I was the only technical leader from the business. So I was around 40-ish owners, and not being an owner myself, that was really where, really took in what does it look like to run a good MSP, and more importantly, what's the data and the financials need to look like to run a good MSP. I think quite often you said there at the beginning that we all start these businesses because someone says to you, you're really good at technical, and then all of a sudden we now need to be really good at P&L and finances and HR and people management, and nobody told us about those bits. We were just really good at technical.
Yeah, just as we always do, because you don't know what's coming up next, because it's our podcast. We kind of ask any questions we like. Let's just talk about community for a minute. We're going to talk about service delivery, which is what it's about. But one of the missions that that Stuart and I have got over this next year, and you and I have actually spoken about this, is how can we reach and how can we demonstrate the value for people who don't come to events, communities, social platforms, podcasts, whatever it might be. We're getting about 400 at the time of recording. We get about 400 downloads a week to this podcast, which is incredible, and we thank every single listener for making this happen. But we can help many more people, can't we, Darren? But we know that sometimes the MSPs are quite reserved and they don't want to go and share, and they sort of think it's a waste of time to go out and learn things, and I'm too busy, I can't do these sort of things. What would if we were standing in front of a load of MSPs who had never been to an event, never been to a community, never stepped outside their door, but are listening to this podcast, what would you say to them about the benefits of getting involved in the growth community, I think?
Well, I think you just mentioned a few things there, aren't you? It's about your introverts. You've not got enough time. You're trying to firefight all day long. But actually, if you want to make a difference here and you want to build an asset, and I think that's the difference. If you want to be a lifestyle business and you're good being technical and you want to deliver that way, there's nothing wrong with that. You set your stall out and you run on that. If you're saying to your spouse that I'm building an asset here, and that's the reason why I'm doing 60, 70 hours a week, and eventually we will retire on this asset being sold, you're not going to do that on your own. that's where the community kicks in. That's where you realize that, the biggest wake up call when you hit a community is you think that your business and your problems are so unique. And when you hit the community, you realize that everybody's got exactly these same issues and everybody's in different parts of that journey through those issues. And that's what you can leverage. People that are further on in that journey, they can tell you the 20 things that they did wrong, and that stops you from doing the same problem.
And it's funny because you all think that you're doing the same thing. Well, you're providing a similar service, I think, is as far as I would kind of caveat that out. But the way you're doing it, the flavour of the cake, the way you're cutting it is all different. And not everybody. The thing I love about the clients that we work with is we have some of our smaller guys who are, like low 6-figure businesses, are actually teaching some of our boardroom, our multi 7-figure businesses on how to be personally more productive, how to be kind of healthier, how to actually just say no and make sales in a different way. And likewise, it kind of all works around the other way. So there's really, the wonderful thing about, the things that we've learned in the challenge is no one judges anyone. No one turns up and says, "Oh, you're running a."
And also that people think there's a lot of risk. People think, oh, well, if I come to this community, you're going to pinch all my customers. Nobody's there
Yes.
for that. There's lots of fish in the sea, and we can all just play in them seas together. Especially I've worked with a lot of businesses in central London, and they're literally on each other's doorsteps, like round the corner from each other, and they're showing financial figures as though they're miles away because it's just not a problem.
No, I think the only people, I say this when people join the Growth Hub, the only people who are your competition are the people not in this community or not in the growth community, the people who are sitting out there. But anyway, I thought I'd just chuck that one in because I think it's a really key point and a really valuable one for the listeners as well. Now, your business is built on creating, helping MSPs to create world-class service delivery. What does that actually look like in terms of tangible things and stuff and bits and bobs? What does world-class service delivery look like, and where in the process of the MSP does it focus and sit?
Yeah, well, for us, it's starting with the end in mind. So, what data do we want to run this business on? What's the USPs that we want to be known for, and how much money do we want to make? What's the bottom line going to be? No business is here unless it's making money. So, whereabouts do we want to be against those best-in-class figures when we're looking at net profit, EBITDA, etc.? And then what are our USPs? What do we want to be known for? So, for instance, in one of my MSPs, it was all about the fast response and an initial fix. So, you would ring our service desk, we would keep you on the phone, we wouldn't put the phone down until it was fixed, and we would fix it within 30 minutes. And we'd fix roughly 75% of all inbound calls in that manner. That was our USP. People wanted it. You rung up, I need to print something right now, I'm going into a meeting. You don't want a ticket reference and a call back tomorrow. You want the printer to run now. So that's what we built our USP on. So then that then forms between those two things around what's the data and the profitability and what's our USP, that then forms this is how I'm going to set up my service desk. This is how my SOPs and my processes, this is how my PSA is going to work, this is how my reporting tool is going to work, this is how my RMM is going to work, my training for my individuals and my structure of the teams. That's going to define all of that. So if, for instance, like us, it was all about response and keeping people on the phone, well, that then dictates you've got to have a full triangle upside down. So that triangle has got to be least cost resource at the very bottom and as many of them as you can, because you need to be able to cope with that demand of phone calls. So then you've got to build a service and a structure that brings on apprenticeships, junior people, but structure in a way that the risk doesn't go higher and the customer feels like they know exactly what they're on about, even if they're running from a process. That then dictates that type of structure. And then that's what we would help you to build and execute and train and build the processes and the PSA.
And I think one thing I just want to flick in at this point is that whatever we're going to talk about, and I'd like to talk about a few metrics in a minute, is listen and let what Darren and I are saying wash over you. But I don't want anybody, because I know what you guys are like, all of a sudden go, oh my god, how do I get my figures to that? Oh my god, I'm getting stressed because I need to do this and I've got a shiny ball over here, and will that PSA help me, and all this sort of thing. Trust the process on how to grow an MSP, and Darren's, we're just talking about this particular piece at the moment, and don't just knee jerk because you heard something that someone else did, and
Yeah,
start with the
definitely.
end in mind is exactly what Darren just said. What is it you've just what is it you've just tried to achieve? I've just had a growth planning session with one of our clients, and I said, well, what do you want? How do you want to increase the business next year? And he said, well, let's put 500,000 on it. I said, great, let's break that down. What do you mean? Well, how much of it's going to be? How much do you reckon you can do without any effort at all? How much of it is going to, do we need new marketing? How much of it can we do through optimizing our account management process? And how much of that profitability can we increase by looking at our operational efficiency? Exactly what we're talking about today. And before we did it, he needed 9 clients. I said, do you reckon between now and next year we'll be able to put 9 clients through your business? He went, well, I reckon we could do it in 6 months. I said, well, let's just go with a year and we'll see how we get with from there. But when you break it down, it's really not that, you don't need huge.
Yeah, but so many times people come up with these numbers, especially when you're talking about legacy plan numbers. What do we want this business to be valued at the end of this? People just pluck the number that they've heard because they heard it in the corridor. Then you need to start structuring that down. Like you've just said, where is that going to come from? What's the different avenues? Is it technical services? Is it managed services? Is it security? What does the cross-selling look like? All of those different angles have not even been thought about. It's just a number that they've just plucked.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing what, in terms of best in class numbers around kind of EBITDA revenue per employee, what are the metrics that you work with, if you don't mind sharing, to
Yeah,
see? But
yeah,
guys,
yeah. I mean,
don't get overwhelmed with
don't
this.
get et up on these.
No,
Yeah,
just listen to it. And if you're not where he is right now, then just
yeah.
don't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, we use service leadership, which traditionally came from Paul Dipple. And the very top line figures are you get your revenue, and then you want 51% of that is best in class service gross margin. So, how much does it cost you to deliver that service? So, that's your whole technical team, maybe even other functions like if you've got team leaders in technical team, you've got a technical manager, they are a function of that team. So, their costs should go against that service gross margin. Then we look at sales, admin, and marketing. That should come in at 30% of the revenue. So that's your cost of delivery on the back end. Typically, again, in a lot of MSPs, that's higher because you're doing a lot of manual work to produce billing, to do sales, to do marketing. Because what we're not doing is using cookie cutters to re-deliver the same services over and over again. So what we do is we manipulate the service every time we sell it, which then becomes an absolute nightmare when we come to back-end systems. Then we'd end up with 20%, 21% net profit. So that's very top level where we'd be looking at how do we deliver those services. Then when we dig into technical, we've got other avenues that as a technical manager we should be monitoring. Things like ticket per endpoint. So how many tickets per endpoint do we have? How many tickets per engineer? How many engineers per endpoints do we have? Those types of metrics then will help us to understand the service gross margin. So let's say the service gross margin is below 51%, and let's say it's 40%. If our other key KPIs within the service team are at best in class, let's say 240 endpoints per tech, roughly 4 to 4.5 tickets per endpoint, what we can then say is the service gross margin is too low because actually we're delivering the Starship Enterprise, but the salespeople aren't selling it for the right price.
Right. Right.
Or we have too much other costs in the business, like we're using expensive tools not very correctly, and we've got lots of shiny new tools that we're paying for and we're getting no value out of them. So it's one of those two things then that would become the reason why service gross margin is too low. But if those other KPIs are too low, then actually it's the performance and the structure and the way we're delivering operations which is causing the service gross margin to come down.
Exactly that. And what you've just explained how to, to measure, but then we're going to talk about measurement in a minute, but then what you do with that is really important. And if there's any vendors listening out here, you've got we've just onboarded a new client yesterday. I think he's actually bought every single thing that's on the market. And
Loves doing a good shiny new toy.
oh my word, you wouldn't believe it. And if you're listening, you know who you are. We had a good laugh about it, and it was even to a point. Yeah, I've got that. Well, I say I've got that. I've got it, and I've paid for it, but I haven't really optimized it yet. So, if you're listening to this podcast and that's you, stop now. Work out where it is. Go and fix that, because that's just a hole in your bucket. Either get rid of it or use it because you wanted to buy it to start. But that's a whole nother story. One thing that when we were chatting about putting the show together, you mentioned that I didn't think would come up is USP. Normally the USP comes up in when people may say, oh, we all do the same thing, and we're not really that different. But your principles work around the USP is absolutely critical in service delivery, because you're kind of putting a promise out there, aren't you? Saying this is how we do things differently, and then this is how we actually do things differently. Just run through your kind of thinking around why this is so important, Darren.
And that has to go across the whole business as well. We need to turn it. Most MSPs, if we want to be successful, we need to be a sales and marketing function business, not a technical business. So how we structure our sales and marketing and the noise we create and the social media, the sales pitches, the services we build, those have to be concrete. And salespeople will only deliver that concrete if they have trust and belief in the operations delivering it. So everything has to be joined up and everything has to follow that same sequence. And there's lots of MSPs out there. You probably all sat there thinking, yeah, I at least know 20 that's in a 5 mile radius of me. So how do you stand out? When you ring a prospect and you say, oh yeah, we're better than your current IT company because of what? What is it? And what's that tangible asset that you're going to give them? And how does that make their business better? And also, how can you prove that? How can you put people in front of them that are going to sing that same tune because that's actually what you deliver, because that's what they're going to expect? You do that, you show them by other people spreading the word, that's how you're going to grow. That's how you're going to bring new customers on, rather than the opposite, which is who's the cheapest. Nobody wants to be the cheapest. If you're the cheapest, there's something wrong.
Let's have some good and bad examples. What's the worst USP that you've kind of heard, or the worst collection of USPs that you've ever heard or seen?
Well, the three that everyone always says is our response time, our partnership, we're here for the long term, and you've got a dedicated account manager. So I'm sat there as a prospect. I've had 5 IT companies, and all 5 of you said the same thing. So what am I going to do? I'm going to say, right, okay, who's the cheapest? Or who was the guy I'd go to the bar with and buy a beer? There's that as well. So you need to really stand out. And for us in our old MSP, it was about response time, but actually we called it first time fix. So you ring us, we keep you on the phone. Within 30 minutes, we'll close 75% of your problems. Wherever possible, that's what we aim for. And that in your business means X, Y, Z around. If your MD rings up and he's got a proposal he needs to print, we're going to do our best to fix that there and then. And if it's not, it's escalated and worked on just as quickly. And you dictate the priorities to us. So if you log that as a P1, we're never going to complain because you know what is impacting your business. And we just gatekeeper that. But if that's what you're setting your starlight as, you need to deliver that operationally. Because, like I say, salespeople won't sing that tune unless they have confidence that that's what's being delivered.
How would you recommend an MSP would start to find or even work out what their USP is?
Ask your customers. Ask your customers why they're still with you. Why is it that you've been with us X amount of years? What's the best thing you like about us? A USP could be that actually you're just all really friendly. We ring you up, you're all really friendly, you speak English. It could be as simple as that. But yeah, my advice would be let's go out there and let's ask customers. Let's ask people why are they still with us? Why did they come with us in the first place? Throughout the sales process, uh, what was the reason you came with us? What was the thing that meant you picked us and not somebody else?
Yeah, yeah, and it's always part of our sales and marketing framework that we use. Is once you think you've worked it out, go and talk to the people who love you and pay you, because remember, you haven't got a business until you get money for something. And just say to them, doing a bit of market research, can you just verify, what is it we do for you, and then keep asking, and that does, and that does, and that does, until you get to the bottom bit. And the bottom bit's the bit that you then go and put on your marketing. This is
Yeah.
the business
And the
outcome.
critical bit is once you've done all of that, get them to do a video testimonial and a write-up testimonial to value that and use that, because there's nothing better than somebody else singing that tune.
So once we've got that USP, what's the important element? Obviously, you've got it. The sales guys understand it. Is it a case of really embedding that within the culture of the business and in the operations of the business, so everyone lives and breathes it? Or is there some special source that enables this to be a critical part of service delivery?
Yeah, so for me, the next step is what we call a service catalogue. So it's taken from ITIL. So a service catalogue says, here's the Bible and what we must do in this service. And then here's the other documents across all the other different departments that follow that Bible. And it's written in their language, it's what they need to know, and it's concrete. It's written down in firm, solid words that there's no fluffiness. And the whole business is reading those documents, delivering those documents, and responsible for keeping them living, breathing documents. The main thing we see in a lot of new partners is when you pull back all the bits of the skin of the onion, it's actually no one really knows what we deliver. No one really knows. If I said to you in your IT support, do you go to site to rebuild a workstation, or does your customer have to send it to you and you'll do it remotely, or do you not do it at all and it's project work? I'd probably get 5 different answers across the table. So how do we make that a very firm answer so when the customer calls, they get the same answer every time? I talk a lot about McDonald's and Big Macs. How do they deliver the same drive-through, the same experience to get that Big Mac meal across worldwide? And this is franchises. We've got a service desk, typically 30 people and less, and we struggle to deliver that same customer service. They do it globally across franchises with college people that are typically there 1 to 3 years. How's that done? That's done because they've got a Bible of how they deliver that service and it's followed to the clock, because they've even got automated fryers that beep when the chips are ready to make sure they're the right color.
Yeah, and this is then taking taking the vision, the value, the mission, the USP, the culture, whatever you want to call it, and I'm going to continue with your food theme for a minute and marinate it through everybody, so that everybody understands what good looks like, what bad looks like, so that and it's around having that scalable MSP. What a great name. A scalable business that's a process that doesn't involve you in it, because when you want to go and exit and get a valuation, guess what? They're going to ask you, hey, how
We're
much are you
involved.
involved in the business?
Correct.
That's right.
Yeah. And as soon as they find out how involved you are, they're going to take an average salary of someone that doing your role, times it by 7, and take that off the cost of what they're going to give you.
Yeah. So be careful when you say, no, I'm all hands off, don't worry about it. And this is taking, the whole growth thing to the complete next level, isn't it? Which is brilliant. Right, finally, let's talk about. I know we talked a little bit about measurements. We talked about some of the metrics at the beginning and KPIs. Measure what matters. There's some great books out there. Most of the time, what a surprise, MSPs completely overthink this and measure absolutely every single thing that they need to measure. What are some of the key metrics of customer service delivery? What happens as the business is progressing? How happy your customers are? What are the key things that you look for in that?
Yeah, so it all starts at the top again. What are we going to run this business on? What's the revenue need to look like? What's the profitability need to look like? EBITDA, and what's our USP? So, starting with that and being able to track that firmly, and then forecasting that out over the next 5, 10 years. So we call that a value creation plan. So
Yeah,
how does that going to get forecasted out as we grow this business? And then that gets distilled down into all the different layers around the department heads, the departments, the team
yeah,
leads, the individuals. Painting what does good look like for an individual finishing their day, their week, their month. That's how you keep people. Uh, Wages have got a thing to play in this, but
yeah,
actually, it's proven that if an individual leaves your business feeling happy and that they've contributed and they've done their job well, they'll stay with you longer.
yeah,
So, bringing that all the way down to the bottom, if your USP is about, for instance, first time fix, then that individual in the service desk needs to have a first time fix KPI,
yeah,
but also he needs to have a CSAT and a close mechanism, and ultimately also what time have they inputted into the system. And we're not looking for time to see whether they've been lazy. We know that from other items that go on in the business.
yeah,
What we want the time for is because we deliver labor. Our biggest cost is labor, and we need to attribute that labor, i.e., that time,
yeah.
against every service we deliver individually, so we can understand the service gross margin of those services across all of our customers.
So I just got another question while you were just talking there, Darren, which be interesting to see what the answer to this is. So some people are, now bringing people back into the office, everybody in the office, and we've still got some teams out in hybrid, and we've got some, young millennials, and I think, do you know what? I think millennials are now like 40 years old, aren't they? So they're like to me, it's like, shit, man, this is getting off the wall now. So they've got loads of other categories as well for younger people, but I don't want to insult anyone. But let's just say, what's the best way for an MSP to ensure that he has an engaged, connected workforce when they're running hybrid, where you've got some people who are remote and some people who are in the office? A, that must be a massive challenge, but B, how can we overcome that and help that?
Yeah, so for me, the models that I've seen work is when you can actually get people in the office for a percentage of time. I think a lot of people are struggling if they're remote full time. It's very hard not to become just a ticket monster, and then you can become a ticket monster for anybody. There's no buy into the team, there's no culture and structure there. So I think a hybrid and mixing it up is definitely the way to go. And for me, my two advices would be create KPIs that are all end results. If you start to, for instance, put software on the machines to see what time they logged on, what time they logged off, and when did the mouse move, that's just not the way to do it. The way to do it is what's the results I want, and then how you get that, I don't really care, sort of thing. And then the other thing is when you're doing meetings, a big mistake I see is the 5 people in the office will sit around a table, and the other 5 people will be on a Teams call on a big screen on the wall. That doesn't create for good engagement. The way that they tell you to do it, if you read a lot of the books, is as soon as you have one person remote, everybody should act as though they're remote. So everybody should join Teams. So everybody gets the same experience. Because otherwise, what you find is the 5 people in the room go off on a conversation and the other 5 people can't hear half of it and they're not engaged with it and they feel like I'm not a part of this team. So what you should do is put everybody on Teams and everybody should join from the same way.
That's a really good point, and one that Stuart actually practices, because whenever we're in the office together, he always says, "Oh, we'll do this separately because it's a completely different dynamics when we're differently on the call." And you're absolutely right with that. I love that. Top tip for a long time. That one is. Thank you for that, Darren. Darren, thank you ever so much. Just starting to wrap up now for the show this afternoon. Absolutely brilliant. Value bombs all over the place. You've helped create a bucket load of content that the channel's probably not going to be able to unsee for many, many months to come once this comes out. So thanks ever so much for that. Let's just have a quick summary for you. What's the kind of the message for 2024 that you've got for MSPs if they're looking to create that saleable, scalable, profitable asset?
I think the thing for me is everyone wants a quick win. Anyone wants a new shiny new toy that's going to change the world. We've got to remember here that it's a journey. So plan your value creation plan, minimum of 5 years. Keep on that journey, keep it consistent, and execution is the key. Too many times I see people veering off different shiny new toys, take different directions. Nothing works unless you keep that consistency. So that consistent message, consistent execution, that's what makes a difference.
Fantastic. Been brilliant. Well, thanks again, Darren. Do you want to just spend a couple of minutes just letting people know how they can get in contact with you? We'll put all the links and everything that you give us into the show notes so they'll be able to find us from there. But if someone wants to continue the conversation, like what they've heard this afternoon, then how do they find you?
Yeah, I mean, we spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, so you can find either myself, Darren Strong, on LinkedIn or Scalable MSP. And obviously, we have the website as well, scalablemsp.co.uk. Happy to have any conversations. I'm a big go-giver in the community. So even if it's just a conversation you want, this isn't going to be a sales pitch.
Fantastic. That's brilliant stuff. Well, look, all the luck and success for you guys in 2024. I'm sure I've got a funny feeling this might not be our last podcast or the only podcast of this year. So I'm sure we can add a load more value and help a load more MSPs out. So thanks once again. Look forward to speaking to you soon, and I'll catch up with the rest of you guys on the next podcast. Take care, and I'll see you soon. So I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, I'd love it if you could leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. If you want to learn more about how to take your MSP to $1 million, or if you're already there, go faster, then come and join Stuart Warwick and myself in the Scale with Confidence Facebook group. The link is in the show notes. You go and enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to connecting with you soon.